Welcome to HFY Stories. If you're ready for jaw-dropping stories and a universe full of excitement, hit that subscribe button like it's the big red button in a space opera. Give us a like if you're feeling that interstellar vibe and comment below to join the conversation. We want to hear from you, yes, you, the spacefarer with a great story idea or just a fan of epic human victories. The Arrival. Captain Kira Holt stared at the holographic projection of Earth from the bridge of the Galactic Alliance cruiser Endurance. She had seen many planets in her time, but none quite like this one. The swirling blues, greens, and whites of Earth's surface were deceptive. This was no ordinary world. It was a deathworld, a place where the weak were culled and only the strong survived. The mission was clear: retrieve the survivors of the crash-landed transport ship Heron and avoid any unnecessary entanglements with the indigenous population. The Galactic Alliance knew better than to interfere with Earth's apex predators, humans. "Captain, we've entered orbit," Lieutenant Zara reported, her voice steady despite the tension that gripped the entire crew. The stories they had heard about humans were enough to keep even the bravest soldiers on edge. "Prepare the landing party," Kira ordered. "I want this done quickly and quietly." As the landing craft descended through the atmosphere, Kira's mind raced. The Heron had been carrying valuable cargo, a diplomatic envoy of the Alliance's most promising negotiators. If any harm had befallen them, it could mean the end of fragile peace. And on Earth, harm was almost a certainty. The landing craft touched down in a dense forest, far from any human settlements. The air was thick with humidity, and the sounds of alien wildlife echoed through the trees. Kira adjusted her armor, the weight of responsibility heavy on her shoulders. "Stay sharp," she instructed her team, her voice a low growl. "We're on Earth now. Anything can happen." The forest was alive with movement, shadows darting between the trees. The team moved in formation, weapons at the ready, scanning the underbrush for any signs of danger. They had barely taken a dozen steps when the first attack came. A blow of motion, a flash of teeth. One of the soldiers was down before anyone could react. Kira barely caught sight of the predator that took him. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. Fast, lethal, and with a look in its eyes that chilled her to the bone. "Form up," she shouted, firing her plasma rifle into the trees. The creature retreated, but Kira knew it was still out there, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike again. The team pressed on, but the forest seemed to close in around them. Every step was a battle against the unknown. Kira could feel the tension in the air, a palpable fear that gnawed at the edges of their resolve. They were being hunted. They finally reached the crash site. The Heron lay in ruins, smoke still rising from its twisted metal hull. But there were no bodies, no signs of the crew. Only the bloodstains that marked where they had been dragged away. "Captain, over here," Zara called, her voice shaking. Kira rushed to the side and found a survivor, a diplomat, barely conscious and clinging to life. His eyes fluttered open as Kira knelt beside him. They took them," he whispered, his voice ragged. "Humans, they took them." Kira's heart sank. This was worse than she had imagined. If the humans had taken the envoy, there was no telling what they might do. The Alliance had always feared what would happen if the humans ever turned their predatory instincts toward them. "We need to find them," Kira said, determination hardening her voice. "We can't let the humans." Before she could finish, the forest erupted in chaos. The humans were upon them, moving with a terrifying speed and coordination. Kira barely had time to react as one of them tackled her to the ground, disarming her in a single fluid motion. She looked up into the eyes of her captor, a human male, his expression cold and calculating. There was no hint of mercy in his gaze, only the ruthless efficiency of a predator that had found its prey. "You're coming with us," he said, his voice a low, menacing growl. "And don't try anything stupid. We wouldn't want to have to hurt you. Yet." As Kira was dragged to her feet, she knew they were in deep trouble. Earth-bred predators, not prey, and they had just become the next targets. Captive on Earth, the humans moved with a precision that Kira found unsettling. They were highly organized, their movements synchronized as if they shared a collective mind. She had heard stories of human resilience and adaptability, but seeing it firsthand was another matter entirely. Kira, Zora, and the surviving members of their team were bound and blindfolded, their weapons confiscated. They were marched through the forest in silence, their captors saying nothing, giving no hint of their intentions. The only sounds were the crunch of leaves underfoot and the distant calls of alien creatures. When the blindfold was finally removed, Kira found herself in a makeshift camp, surrounded by a group of humans. They were a mix of soldiers and civilians, all of them hardened by the harsh realities of their world. Their leader, the man who had captured her, stepped forward. "Captain Holt, is it?" he said, his tone almost conversational. "My name is Commander Marcus Kane. Welcome to Earth." Kira said nothing, meeting his gaze with defiance. Kane's eyes were cold, but there was something else there, something she couldn't quite place. "We don't get many visitors down here," Kane continued, circling her like a predator sizing up its prey. "And those who do come usually aren't too eager to leave." "What do you want from us?" Kira demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. She had faced many dangers in her career, but none as unpredictable as this. Kane smiled, a predatory grin that sent a chill down her spine. "You and your team are going to help us, whether you like it or not." "Help you with what?" Zara spoke up, her voice edged with fear. "Survival," Kane replied simply. "This world is a deathworld, as I'm sure you're aware. Only the strong survive here. And right now, we're fighting for our lives against an enemy that makes even the worst predators on this planet look like harmless kittens." Kira frowned, her mind racing. The Galactic Alliance had always known that humans were dangerous, but this was different. If they were being truthful, if there was a threat even greater than the humans themselves. "And if we refuse?" Kira asked, already knowing the answer. Kane's expression darkened. "Then you die. Simple as that." There was no room for negotiation. The humans had made their terms clear. Kira knew they had no choice but to cooperate, at least for now. They were led deeper into the camp, where makeshift fortifications had been erected. It was clear that the humans were preparing for something big. Kira could see the tension in their movements, the urgency in their preparations. "What are we up against?" Kira asked as she was escorted to a central command tent. Kane glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "You'll find out soon enough." Inside the tent, Kira was presented with a holographic map of the surrounding area. It showed a vast, inhospitable landscape, dotted with human outposts and alien ruins. But it was the red zones that caught her attention, areas marked as high danger, where even the humans dared not venture. "These red zones," Kira began, "what are they?" "That's where the real danger lies," Kane said, his voice low. "The Reapers." Kira felt a shiver run down her spine. She had heard rumors of the Reapers, an ancient, malevolent force that had driven entire civilizations to extinction. If the humans were fighting them, it explained a lot. But it also meant that they were in far more danger than she had realized. "And you think we can help you fight them?" she asked, skepticism coloring her tone. Kane's eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw something other than cold calculation. She saw desperation. "We don't have a choice," he said quietly. "We've been fighting them for years, and we're losing. But you're not like us. You're from out there. You have technology, knowledge we don't. If there's any chance of defeating the Reapers, we need your help." Kira considered his words. The Galactic Alliance had always feared the humans, but now they were being asked to help them. It was an ironic twist of fate, but one that could not be ignored. "All right," Kira said finally. "We'll help you. But if you double-cross us—" "We won't," Kane interrupted, his voice firm. "We're in this together now. And if we fail, it's not just Earth that's at risk. It's the entire galaxy." Kiera nodded, though a part of her still didn't trust him. But what choice did they have? The Reapers were a threat unlike any other, and if they were going to survive, they needed all the help they could get, even from Earth's predators. As night fell, Kiera found herself alone in the command tent, staring at the holographic map. The Reapers were out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike. But so were the humans, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were just as dangerous. Kane entered the tent, his expression serious. "We move out at dawn. Get some rest." Kiera looked at him, searching his face for any sign of weakness. But there was none. Kane was a predator, through and through. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kane paused, his gaze distant. "Because I don't want to see this planet burn. And because—" He hesitated, and for a moment, Kiera thought he might say something more. But then he simply shook his head and left the tent. Kiera lay down, trying to calm her racing thoughts. The Reapers were coming, and they had no idea what to expect. But one thing was certain: Earth was no place for the weak. The hunt begins. At dawn, the camp was a hive of activity. Soldiers moved with purpose, gathering supplies and weapons, preparing for the coming battle. The tension in the air was palpable, a silent acknowledgement of the dangers that lay ahead. Kiera stood at the edge of the camp, watching as the first rays of sunlight broke through the canopy. She had never seen a sunrise on Earth before, and despite the circumstances, she found it breathtaking. There was a raw, untamed beauty to this world, a reminder of the primal forces that shaped it. But there was no time for reflection. The Reapers were out there, and they were running out of time. "Captain Holt." Kane's voice cut through her thoughts. She turned to see him approaching, his expression grim. "It's time." The plan was simple. They would venture into one of the red zones, draw the Reapers out, and engage them in battle. It was a risky move, but it was their best chance of getting the upper hand. The Reapers were not invincible, but they were cunning, and they had to be careful not to underestimate them. Kiera and her team joined the human soldiers as they set out into the forest. The atmosphere was tense, the silence broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant calls of avian wildlife. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the environment became, as if the very air was charged with danger. The red zone was unlike anything Kiera had ever seen. The trees here were twisted and gnarled, their bark blackened and scarred. The ground was littered with the remains of fallen creatures, their bodies torn apart by some unseen force. It was a graveyard, a place where even the fiercest predators met their end. Kiera could feel the eyes of her team on her, their fear barely contained. They were out of their element, far from the safety of their ships and stations. Here on Earth, they were the prey. Kane signaled for the group to halt. "This is it," he said, his voice low. "The Reapers are close." Kiera tightened her grip on her weapon, their senses on high alert. They were being watched. She could feel it. The Reapers were out there, hiding in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And then they came. The first Reaper appeared as a blur of motion, a dark shape that seemed to melt out of the shadows. It moved with a speed and grace that was almost impossible to track, darting between the trees with deadly precision. The soldiers opened fire, but the Reaper was too fast, weaving through the hail of plasma bolts as if they were nothing. Kiera's heart raced as she tried to keep up, her eyes scanning the trees for any sign of the enemy. But the Reapers were masters of stealth, and they were not alone. More of them emerged from the shadows, their forms barely visible in the dim light. The battle was chaos. The Reapers struck with lethal efficiency, their claws and teeth ripping through armor and flesh. The soldiers fought back with everything they had, but it was clear they were outmatched. The Reapers were too fast, too strong, too cunning. Kiera found herself separated from the group, her back against a tree as a reaper closed in on her. It was a monstrous creature, its eyes glowing with a malevolent intelligence. It snarled, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth, and pounced. But Kira was ready. She sidestepped at the last moment, bringing her weapon up and firing point-blank into the reaper's side. The creature screeched in pain, its body convulsing as the plasma bolt tore through it. But even as it fell, it lashed out with its claws, raking them across Kira's arm. She cried out in pain, but there was no time to stop. Another reaper was already moving toward her, its eyes locked on its fallen comrade. Kira knew she was in trouble. The wound on her arm was deep, and she could feel the blood flowing freely. She was losing strength, and the reaper could sense it. Just as the creature lunged, a blur of motion caught Kira's eye. Kane was there, moving with a speed and agility that matched the reaper's. He tackled the creature to the ground, driving his knife into its neck with a savage force. "Get up," he shouted, pulling Kira to her feet. "We're not done yet." The battle raged on, but the humans and their alien allies were holding their ground. Kira could see the determination in their eyes, the fierce resolve that drove them to keep fighting, even in the face of overwhelming odds. They were predators, every one of them, and they would not go down without a fight. But as the last Reaper fell, Kira knew this was only the beginning. The Reapers were relentless, and they would not stop until they had claimed every last life on this planet. "We need to fall back," Kane said, his voice tight with urgency. "There will be more of them." Kira nodded, her arm throbbing with pain. They had won this battle, but the war was far from over. And as they retreated back to the safety of the camp, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them, something even more dangerous than the Reapers. Allies and enemies. Back at the camp, the atmosphere was grim. The losses had been heavy, and the survivors were exhausted, both physically and mentally. The Reapers were unlike any enemy they had ever faced, and the toll of the battle was evident on every face. Kira sat in the command tent, her arm bandaged, but still throbbing with pain. She couldn't stop thinking about the Reapers, their ferocity, their intelligence. They were more than just mindless predators. They were calculating, strategic, and they had targeted the humans for a reason. Kane entered the tent, his expression hard. "We need to talk." Kira looked up at him, her eyes narrowing. "About what?" "About what we're really up against," Kane said, his voice low. "The Reapers aren't just some random threat. They've been hunting us for years, and we've been barely holding them off. But it's not just us they're after." "What do you mean?" Kira asked, her heart sinking. Kane sighed, running a hand through his hair. "The Reapers are ancient, older than the Galactic Alliance, older than most of the species in the galaxy. And they have a purpose that goes beyond just survival." Kira frowned, trying to piece together what he was saying. "You're saying they're intelligent." "More than that," Kane said, his voice grim. "They're an ancient weapon, designed to cull the weak and ensure only the strongest survive. They've wiped out entire civilizations before, and now they're turning their attention to Earth." Kira's blood ran cold. The implications of what he was saying were staggering. If the Reapers were indeed a weapon, then the entire galaxy was at risk. "We need to warn the Alliance," she said urgently. "If the Reapers are a threat to more than just Earth, we have to." "It's not that simple," Kane interrupted, his voice firm. "The Alliance won't listen. They've always considered Earth to be a backwater, a place best left alone. They won't mobilize their forces for a threat they don't understand." Kira clenched her fists, frustration boiling inside her. The Alliance had always been cautious, too cautious, and now that caution could cost them everything. "Then what do we do?" she demanded. Kane met her gaze, his expression unreadable. "We fight. We find a way to stop the Reapers, here and now, before they can spread. But we'll need more than just brute force. We need allies, other species who have faced the Reapers before, who know how to defeat them." Kiera considered his words. It was a risky plan, but it was their only option. The Reapers were too dangerous to be left unchecked, and they couldn't afford to wait for the Alliance to act. "All right," she said finally. "I'll help you. But we need to move fast. The Reapers won't wait for us to get our act together." Kane nodded, a flicker of relief in his eyes. "Agreed. I'll start reaching out to the other species we've made contact with. There are a few who might be willing to help, but it's going to take some convincing." Kiera stood, her mind racing with the possibilities. They had a chance, however slim, to stop the Reapers. But it would require everything they had, and more. As she left the tent, she found herself thinking about Kane. There was something about him, something that set him apart from the other humans she had met. He was a predator, yes, but there was more to him than that. There was a depth to his determination, a fire that burned brighter than she had ever seen in anyone else. And despite everything, despite the danger they were in, she couldn't help but feel drawn to him. It was a feeling she couldn't quite explain, a connection that seemed to go beyond mere survival. But there was no time for such thoughts. The Reapers were coming, and they needed to be ready. Over the next few days, Kiera and Kane worked tirelessly to prepare for the next phase of their plan. Messages were sent out to potential allies, weapons were gathered, and strategies were discussed. It was a race against time, and every moment counted. But as the preparations continued, Kiera couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. There was a tension in the air, a sense of impending doom that hung over the camp like a dark cloud. And then, just as they were about to make their move, the Reapers struck again. This time, they came in greater numbers, their attack more coordinated, more vicious. The camp was thrown into chaos as the Reapers descended upon them, tearing through defenses with terrifying speed. Kiera fought with everything she had, her blaster firing rapidly as she tried to fend off the onslaught. But it was clear they were being overwhelmed. The Reapers were too strong, too relentless. And then she saw him. Kane was in the thick of the battle, fighting with a ferocity that was unmatched. He moved like a force of nature, his blade slicing through Reaper after Reaper with deadly precision. But even he was struggling to keep up with the sheer number of enemies. "Kane!" Kiera shouted, her voice barely audible over the sounds of battle. But he didn't hear her. He was too focused, too intent on the fight. And then, just as a Reaper lunged at him from behind, Kiera's instincts took over. She fired her blaster, the bolt striking the creature in the chest and sending it crashing to the ground. Kane turned, his eyes meeting hers for a brief moment. There was something in his gaze, something that made her heart skip a beat. But there was no time for that now. The Reapers were still coming, and they had to find a way to turn the tide. As the battle raged on, Kiera realized that they were out of options. They couldn't hold out much longer. They needed to retreat, to regroup and find another way. "Kane," she shouted again, this time louder. "We need to fall back." He hesitated, his eyes scanning the battlefield. He knew she was right, but it was clear he didn't want to give up the fight. But then he nodded, a grim determination in his eyes. "Fall back," he yelled to the others. "Retreat to the secondary position." The survivors began to pull back, fighting off the Reapers as they retreated toward the secondary camp. It was a desperate move, but it was their only chance. As they reached the relative safety of the secondary camp, Kiera felt a sense of relief wash over her. They had survived, but barely. But as she looked at Kane, she could see the toll the battle had taken on him. He was exhausted, his face pale, his movements slow. And yet, despite everything, there was still that fire in his eyes, that unbreakable spirit that had drawn her to him in the first place. "We'll stop them," she said quietly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "We'll find a way." Kane looked at her, his expression softening for a brief moment. "I know we will," he said, his voice low. "But we have to be ready for what's coming next." Kiera nodded, her resolve hardening. The Reapers were not invincible, and they would find a way to defeat them. But it would take everything they had, and more. And as they prepared for the next battle, Kira couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something much larger, something that would change the fate of the galaxy forever. Predators unleashed. The next few days were a blow of activity. The survivors worked tirelessly to fortify the secondary camp, reinforcing defenses and gathering supplies. Every moment was spent preparing for the next encounter with the Reapers, knowing that they could strike at any time. Kiera and Kane had little time to talk, their focus entirely on the task at hand. But there was an unspoken understanding between them, a bond that had formed in the heat of battle. They were partners now, united by a common goal, and a shared determination to see it through. The messages they had sent out to potential allies had gone unanswered, leaving them to face the Reapers alone. But Kiera refused to give up hope. They had faced impossible odds before, and they would do so again. As night fell on the third day, the camp was eerily quiet. The tension was palpable, every soldier on high alert, their weapons at the ready. The Reapers were out there, somewhere in the darkness, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Kiera stood at the edge of the camp, her eyes scanning the tree line. She could feel the weight of the battle ahead, the knowledge that this could be their last stand. But she was not afraid. She was ready. And then she saw it. A flicker of movement in the shadows, a glimpse of something dark and fast. The Reapers were here. Alert! Kiera shouted, raising her weapon. They're coming. The camp erupted into action, soldiers taking up defensive positions, weapons trained on the tree line. The Reapers emerged from the darkness like a wave of death, their forms barely visible in the dim light. But this time, Kiera was ready. She and Kane had devised a plan, a way to turn the Reapers' own tactics against them. The soldiers held their ground, luring the Reapers into a carefully laid trap. As the Reapers closed in, Kiera signaled to the soldiers. Now! Explosions rocked the forest as the trap was sprung, a series of charges detonating in rapid succession. The Reapers were caught off guard, their ranks thrown into disarray as the explosions tore through their ranks. Kiera didn't hesitate. She charged forward, her weapon blazing as she cut down the nearest Reaper. The other soldiers followed her lead, pressing the attack with a ferocity that matched the Reaper's own. The battle was intense, the air filled with the sounds of blaster fire and the roars of the Reapers. But this time, the humans had the advantage. The Reapers were strong, but they were not invincible. Kane fought alongside Kiera, his blade flashing as he took down Reaper after Reaper. There was a fierceness in his movements, a determination that was almost palpable. He was a predator, just like the Reapers, but he fought with a purpose that went beyond mere survival. As the battle raged on, Kiera found herself side by side with Kane, their movements perfectly synchronized. They were a team, each one anticipating the other's actions, their bond forged in the crucible of combat. But just as it seemed they were gaining the upper hand, a new threat emerged. A Reaper larger than any they had seen before stepped out of the shadows, its eyes glowing with a malevolent intelligence. It was the leader, the one guiding the others, and it was coming straight for them. Kiera and Kane exchanged a glance, a silent agreement passing between them. They had to take down this Reaper, no matter the cost. They moved as one, their attacks coordinated and precise. But the Reaper was unlike any they had faced before. It was faster, stronger, and more cunning, its every move calculated to exploit their weaknesses. The battle was brutal. Each strike met with equal force, each maneuver countered with deadly precision. Kiera could feel their strength waning, her body pushed to its limits. But she refused to give up. She couldn't give up. And then, just as the Reaper seemed poised to deliver the killing blow, Kane acted. With a roar, he threw himself at the Reaper, his blade driving deep into its side. The creature screeched in pain, its massive body convulsing as it tried to shake him off. Kiera! Kane shouted, his voice strained. Now! Kiera didn't hesitate. She raised her blaster and fired, the bolt striking the Reaper in the head. The creature let out one final, agonized scream before collapsing to the ground, its body twitching in its death throes. For a moment, there was silence. The other Reapers, sensing the loss of their leader, faltered, their advance slowing. The soldiers took advantage of the confusion, pressing the attack and driving the Reapers back. As the last of the Reapers were cut down, Kiera and Cain stood over the fallen leader, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. They had done it. They had won. But the victory was bittersweet. The camp was in ruins, the survivors battered and exhausted. They had lost many good people, and the fight had taken its toll on them all. Kiera looked at Cain, her eyes meeting his. There was a weariness in his gaze, but also something else, something that made her heart ache with a strange, unfamiliar feeling. "We did it," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Cain nodded, his expression softening. "Yeah," he said, his voice equally soft. "We did." For a moment, they just stood there, the weight of the battle hanging heavy between them. There was so much they wanted to say, so much they needed to express, but the words wouldn't come. And then, as if by some unspoken agreement, they moved closer, their bodies drawn together by an invisible force. Kiera could feel the heat of his body, the steady rhythm of his breath, and she knew, in that moment, that they had found something more than just victory. They had found each other. The aftermath of the battle was a time of healing and rebuilding. The survivors worked together to restore what had been lost, their bonds strengthened by the trials they had endured. And through it all, Kiera and Cain were inseparable. They were more than just partners, more than just allies. They were something deeper, something stronger. In the end, they had done more than just defeat the Reapers. They had forged a bond that would last a lifetime, a bond born of fire and steel, of blood and sacrifice. And as they looked out over the newly rebuilt camp, hand in hand, they knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together. For they were predators, unleashed and unstoppable. They were human. The end.